all of my own school. I was going to, I was thinking that I would move to New York, like everybody thinks that they were going to move to New York, but I absolutely was flat broke. I had no money. I had a car that barely worked. I was offered a couple of teaching positions, but the first one I was offered was at Austin College in Sherman, Texas. Dick Neidhart, who was the chairman there at the time, and also was Vernon Fisher's teacher. And Vernon had been there and left a year before. And
it's funny because right over your shoulder, as I'm sitting here looking at you,
this is the Vernon, yes. And in fact, he's coming by today. So I got there, and he had. So I wasn't his direct replacement, really. Vernon and Julie had left. Julie dealt with more of the 3D things by that time, although I had a background in sort of combined drawing and in 3D. I was taking the 3D, but probably from Dick's point of view, I was also the person who in language and so forth was more like Vernon in interest in literature and so forth. So I stepped into this job, and that's how I moved to Texas. First day I got to Texas, I'm driving in, it's August. I'd been here before when I was a child, but I was 24 years old, driving into Texas. It's August, just before school. My car barely works. I don't know if I had air conditioning in it. I probably didn't. As I pull into Sherman, coming out of Oklahoma and into Sherman, there's a pickup truck burning by the side of the road, and it's got to be like 110 degrees. I think, oh, this is perfect. And then I got to the hotel and there I got the Sherman paper, and of course now Sherman is part of Dallas, really, because it's all extended exurbia. But at that time, there was a break. It was like flatland between, and one of the headlines was about how there had been a blackout in part of Sherman or Denison the day before because a 10-foot chicken snake had fried on a transformer. And I thought, this is not Kansas anymore, I'm now in a new place. So.
Right.
But it was good for me. I learned a lot from it.
Sure. And so you're in Sherman, but I remember hearing you say that even though you were based in Sherman, you were spending upwards of 5 nights a week visiting, as part of your community.
Yes.
In Deep Ellum.
Yeah.
Which is like an hour each way. Yeah.
It would be at that time, because the traffic wasn't as bad. If you didn't hit rush hour, it was 45 minutes. I could get to 500X, which is where I started. First, I had a show. So, I had my first shows were at 500X. Then I showed at a gallery that Diana Block, who ran, called DW Gallery, Dallas Women's Gallery. Then I showed with Barry Whistler. So yes, I would, but I'd drive in and see a movie or go to eat someplace, and 4 or 5 nights a week.
Sure. So it says something about. Well, it either says something about Sherman, or it says something, about a commitment to your notion of an artist being part of a community.
Well, no, it was important for me to have people that I respected or could learn from, and understand and see the work in that context. There were great things about Austin College. It was very scholarly community, and again, since my interests are broad, one of the reasons that they liked me there was because, even more broadly than the art department, was because I had broader intellectual background, I suppose.
Sure.
And it was, I had a couple of nice studios there over the years that I was there, but it was important for me to feel the energy that comes from other people and other cultural events. And so Dallas, Fort Worth, that was probably about an hour, and it was an hour and a half or something, but it was a great drive.
Sure.
at first that was the hardest thing, because for where I had been from, 45 minutes seemed like a long ways. Then it got to be like 45 minutes, like that's nothing. You know what I mean? Now, weirdly, when I'm living in Houston, I live fairly close to where I work. Where I work in my studio, I live above it, but where I work as the director of the Glassell School of Art, it's on a good day with no traffic, it's 15 minutes, and it can take me an hour to get to work. Just because the traffic's so bad. So, but at that time, that was a big. But it took me about a year to go. 45 minutes is nothing.
Right. So I guess there's some transitional in terms of the success of your work. I guess there are those first shows at 500X,
mm-hmm.
but then kind of working your way up the hierarchy of galleries here locally, and the real breakout in terms of your mind in your career, is that when you sell the first piece to the DMA, or is it when Michael Opping comes to you about the Whitney?
I don't know. Certainly the first piece I ever sold to a museum was the piece in the DMA, and I just remember that as being a really interesting and odd experience, because it's the first time you start to think that there's walking into the DMA. The piece was up. It had an element that you had to put on it. Mm-hmm. They'd actually put it on wrong. Okay, I walk in, and this one element that was supposed to hang down in this way is actually pointing up and hanging the opposite way. And it was the first moment that I realized that I couldn't go just pick it and move it, and I would have to. The guard would stop me, so
right.
it no longer belonged to me. It belonged to some other thing,
right.
Out there in the world, and that I would have to get a curator. They'd have to get a preparator, and
did they ever make the adjustment?
Yeah, they did. I called. I think I called Suzanne Weaver, who's there at the time, and I think I said, Suzanne, this thing's put together wrong, and but certainly it was before it was easy to email her pictures, so I think probably I said, check the photograph or the slide. Right. It's put together wrong. It's just got to be reversed.
I remember hearing a story that Bonnard would walk around with a small set of oil paints in his lapel, and that whenever he was invited to a dinner at a patron's house where his work was on the wall, when they were out of the room, he would go about touching up his paintings.
That's great. Well, so that was a transition. Before the biennial, there was a number of things started to happen. I did this show, this exhibition. At first, it was there. I did one at the Huntington Beach Art Center in California. Then I did one with the Center for Curatorial Studies in Bard. Then I did one at what was then the Soros Center in Kiev, which is now the Center for Contemporary. It's the Contemporary Art Museum, whatever it's called, Center for Contemporary Arts. Then I did one in, all of a sudden, there was this sort of run of things that happened. I was in a show at Jeffrey Deitch in New York called Shopping, that was curated by Jérôme Sans, who was curated from Paris. So then suddenly I had a gallery in Paris, and so all of those things happened prior to the biennial. Being in the Whitney Biennial when Michael saw the piece. Michael was great because Michael is so honest as a curator. So he tells you what he likes. You don't always have to agree with him, but he's so direct and honest, and he tells you what he likes and he tells you what he doesn't like. And the piece that now sits in the Modern, which was one of the ones that were in the Whitney, he went in and looked at it, and he said, it was not done. It was not even in bronze. It was in fabric, and he said, "I want this one." And at the time, he indicated, I don't remember how he did it, but he indicated that they would probably buy it if I made it, because that time for me that was a leap in expense to make a piece that big. It was pretty expensive.
Sure.
But it had all built towards that in other ways, and I was getting attention, and there was some writing about it, and the biennial was a great kind of culmination of that period.
Sure. And so somewhere in that timeline, the opportunity in Houston at like Glassell.
Yeah, 1991. I was a tenured professor at Austin College, but I had been running into all of these artists who were coming out of this program called the Core Program, and which is a residency, and partially probably because I had my practice had not developed. It, although it had grown in Texas, it was not, it was, the seed wasn't planted here. I had found an affinity with because those artists were kind of from all over, some of them from Texas, and they were generally my age, and I just had a show that had gotten a lot of visibility in Dallas, or in Houston, right. At the gallery in Houston, and the museum was just buying a piece there, and so then I got offered this to come be the associate director, run the Core Program, and curate exhibitions through the Glassell School of Art. And so I took a 2-year leave of absence from Austin College. They were great, and they gave me 2 years because they would like me to come back, but I thought, so that's when I moved, 91.
Right. And so tell me more about the Glassell School. Is it a degree?
Yes, we have a BFA that we offer through in collaboration with the University of St. Thomas.
Okay.
It also, that's a component of an adult school, which is structured like a BFA program, but actually gives you a certificate because it doesn't include your breadth requirements, liberal arts breadth requirements, or other requirements. So often so it's sort of more than continuing ed, but less than, because you have to go through all the prerequisites as you would. So we have those in studio with some art history component to it. We have a children's school, which particularly in the summers has thousands of kids in it. And then we have this residency program, which is internationally famous, where we have 8 artists, up to 8 artists, and up to 4 in what we call critical studies, but it can be criticism or curation. And they're there for 9 months, renewable for a second term for 2 years. And they're from all over the world. That's our most famous program. The other programs have a great deal of impact in the community there, particularly. But
sure. So how do you go about, I assume that you're part of that decision-making body that decides who those residents
yes,
are going to be.
I am.
How do you go about, because it's a bit of a curation process. Are you what determines?
Well, myself and the associate director of the program. So the program is based on mentoring. So I'm the artist, and she is a critic, curator, art historian, Mary LeClaire. And you have to reapply for your second year. And so we take the responsibility of choosing who is able to get a second year, because that's so much based on, if you're going to get into the program the first year, you're probably doing some interesting work in some way or another. But the program really emphasizes an interactive peer group in which people formally and informally engage in kinds of exchange while they're working in their studio. So it's the wrong program if you're wishing to simply be isolated. Mm-hmm. So in the first year, although I sit on the jury and Mary LeClaire sits on the jury, we invite other jurors from around really around the world potentially, mm-hmm. to meet with or to come in and jury we get hundreds of applicants for just a few positions, and so we're choosing the jurors. So in a way, we're jurying the jury, but we try to make sure that we don't. It doesn't duplicate our interests, but it's right. more reflective of a broad set of interests, and that we vote, but the visiting jurors dominate the discussion. I found going back, looking at it, because my first experience before I was director, of the Core Program in 1991, before I was offered the job, I was a juror, mm-hmm. and then I found